What if Luffy was a celestial dragon? Imagine a world where Monkey D. Luffy, the carefree dreamer who wants to be the pirate king, wasn't a pirate at all. Instead, he grew up as one of the celestial dragons, the most powerful and feared rulers of the One Piece world. No Straw Hat, no gum fruit, no Shanks, but instead, a life of privilege, power, and unimaginable responsibility. What would happen if Luffy, with his boundless spirit, was born into the very system he's destined to fight against? The real rulers of the One Piece world. To truly grasp what would happen if Luffy were a celestial dragon, we need to understand the world they rule. The celestial dragons aren't just elites or wealthy aristocrats. They're the apex of the power pyramid in the One Piece world. While the narrative often centers around the legendary pirates like Goldie Roger or the marine admirals who maintain order, the true rulers remain hidden in plain sight. The celestial dragons, perched high atop the Red Line in the holy land of Mary Joyce, pull the strings of the entire world. They control the Marines and the world government and even manipulate the fates of nations through their whims. The Gorosei, a council of elder statesmen who make critical decisions for the world, are celestial dragons. The Holy Knights, an elite fighting force, serve as their protectors and enforcers. Above them all is the mysterious Emu, the true sovereign of the world, who remains shrouded in secrecy. These figures collectively ensure the dominance of the celestial dragons remains unchallenged. Their wealth and influence allow them to live in unparalleled luxury, isolated from the suffering of the common people. The world's most important decisions, wars, alliances, even the annihilation of entire islands, are made at their behest. Now, picture Luffy, the carefree, freedom-loving boy, growing up in this power-hungry class. Raised as a celestial dragon, Luffy's life would have been one of unimaginable privilege. He wouldn't be chasing dreams of adventure on the high seas, but would instead be groomed to inherit and sustain this corrupt, hierarchical system. Would he adapt to their oppressive ways, or would his innate sense of justice lead him to rebel against his kind? The thought of Luffy navigating this morally twisted world is both fascinating and unsettling, raising countless questions about how his character would evolve in such an environment. At first glance, it might seem absurd. Luffy, the pirate who values freedom above all else, as part of a lineage of oppressive world nobles? But it's not so far-fetched when you consider the clues left in the story. Luffy's grandfather, Monkey D. Garp, is one of the most revered figures in the Marines, known for his immense strength and honor. His father, Monkey D. Dragon, is the leader of the Revolutionary Army, a man who has dedicated his life to overthrowing the Celestial Dragons. Dragon, however, wasn't always a revolutionary. Before he turned against the world government, it's heavily implied that he was a high-ranking Marine, potentially even an admiral. What if, during his time as a Marine, Dragon fell in love with a noble woman from the Holy Land? Such a union would have been scandalous, a forbidden love that defied the rigid rules of the Celestial Dragons. Yet, it could explain why Garp had to raise Luffy in the East Blue, far away from the prying eyes of the world government. In this alternate timeline, however, Dragon chooses a different path. Instead of abandoning the Holy Land and his lover, he stays, attempting to reform the system from within. Luffy is born into this world as the son of a noblewoman and a Marine turned admiral, growing up with privileges that stand in stark contrast to his original life. Being raised in Mary Joyce would drastically alter Luffy's early years. Instead of idolizing pirates like Shanks, he would likely look up to his father, Admiral Emerald Dragon, and his grandfather Garp, who would both represent the epitome of strength and justice in his eyes. This environment would shape Luffy in ways that are unimaginable in the original story, laying the groundwork for a very different kind of hero, or anti-hero. A different childhood, training with the best. Growing up in Mary Joyce as a celestial dragon would mean that Luffy's childhood was completely unlike the one we know. In the original timeline, Luffy's upbringing in the humble East Blue was defined by his relationships with characters like Shanks, Ace, and Sabo. These bonds shaped his love for adventure and his dream of becoming Pirate King. But in this alternate scenario, Luffy's life would be dominated by the rigid structure of nobility and military training. He wouldn't be a carefree kid punching bandits in a village. Instead, he'd be immersed in an environment where excellence in combat and mastery of power were non-negotiable expectations. Luffy's father, Dragon, now an admiral known as the Emerald Dragon, would undoubtedly take an active role in his son's training. Dragon's combat skills, which likely include mastery of Haki and perhaps even storm-based abilities, would be passed down to Luffy. His grandfather Garp, who in this scenario might be more aligned with the Celestial Dragons, would also contribute to Luffy's upbringing. Garp's legendary strength and no-nonsense approach to training would turn Luffy into a prodigy, ensuring he mastered Haki and other combat techniques at a young age. Beyond family, Luffy would also have access to the teachings of the Holy Knights, the elite warriors who protect the Holy Land. These knights, led by figures like Saint Figurland Garling, would push Luffy to develop skills far beyond what he could have learned as a pirate. Swordsmanship, strategy, and leadership would be drilled into him alongside combat training. The carefree, impulsive Luffy, we know, would still shine through in moments, but his personality would be tempered by the strict and disciplined environment of Mary Geoise. This version of Luffy wouldn't just be strong, he'd be a finely honed weapon raised to maintain the Celestial Dragon's dominance over the world. No devil fruit, no straw hat, no Shanks. Without growing up in East Blue, Luffy's story takes a drastic turn. He never meets Shanks, the charismatic pirate who gave him his iconic straw hat and inspired his dream of becoming Pirate King. More importantly, Luffy never eats the Gum Gum fruit, which means no stretchy powers and no path toward becoming the warrior of liberation. This pivotal change creates a ripple effect that alters not just Luffy's destiny, but the entire One Piece world. In this alternate timeline, the Nika fruit, also known as the legendary Devil Fruit, connected to Joy Boy, doesn't end up with Luffy. Instead, it might find its way to Ace, Roger's son, fulfilling the prophecy of Joy Boy that Roger hinted at before his execution. Meanwhile, Luffy's powers take a completely different shape. Growing up in Mary Geoise, surrounded by the Celestial Dragons and their resources, Luffy might inherit a different, equally mythical devil fruit. Perhaps the Hito Hito no Mi model Susanoo no Mikoto. This fruit, inspired by the storm god of Japanese mythology, would grant him control over lightning and storms, aligning him with his father, Dragon's rumored storm-based powers. This Luffy wouldn't be the carefree adventurer sailing the seas in search of freedom. Instead, he would be groomed to become a powerful weapon of the Celestial Dragons, raised to uphold their interests. His powers would be honed not for personal liberation, but for enforcing the will of the world's most oppressive rulers. Yet, even with this starkly different upbringing, would Luffy's rebellious spirit and love for freedom still shine through? Could the boy destined to become the Sun God in another life rise above the expectations of the Holy Land to forge his path? It's a tantalizing possibility that changes everything we thought we knew about Luffy. One of the most intriguing elements of this alternate timeline is Luffy's potential connection to the Holy Knights. These elite warriors, introduced in the manga as the Celestial Dragon's enforcers, represent the pinnacle of strength and loyalty within Mary Geoise. Their leader, Saint Figurland Garling, is a figure of immense significance, not only because of his role as a supreme warrior, but also due to his ties to Shanks' lineage, as revealed in Film Red. In this world, where Luffy grows up among the Celestial Dragons, Garling could take on a role similar to that of Shanks in the original timeline. In this scenario, Luffy, who once idolized Shanks as a pirate, might instead look up to Garling as a mentor and role model. The Holy Knights, with their divine authority and unmatched combat skills, would inspire Luffy to train relentlessly to earn his place among them. His Storm God powers, granted by the Hito Hito no Mi model Susanoo no Mikoto, would make him an invaluable asset to their ranks. Picture this Luffy, clad in the armor of a holy knight, wielding dual blades inspired by Japanese mythology, Kusanagi and Orochi no Aramasa, blades that symbolize his mastery of swordsmanship and his godlike powers. Under Garling's mentorship, Luffy would develop not only his combat skills, but also a sense of duty and loyalty to the Holy Land. However, this raises a critical question. Would Luffy's inherently free-spirited nature eventually clash with the rigid, oppressive doctrines of the Celestial Dragons? Could his admiration for Garling be overshadowed by the growing realization of the corruption and injustice he's being trained to enforce? This tension adds a layer of complexity to Luffy's character, making his potential defiance against the system even more compelling. The world flip Ace as Joy Boy. If Luffy isn't the warrior of liberation in this timeline, someone else must step into the role. That someone is Ace. In this alternate reality, Shanks might never have crossed paths with Luffy in the East Blue. Instead, he delivers the Nika fruit, the legendary devil fruit tied to Joy Boy's legacy, to Ace, fulfilling Gold D. Roger's wish for his son to carry on his will. With the sun god powers of the Nika fruit, Ace's destiny takes a dramatic turn. In this version of events, Ace doesn't join Whitebeard's crew, but instead becomes the liberator of the oppressed, rallying allies and kingdoms under his banner. His rubbery powers and fiery determination allow him to free countless nations from the grip of the celestial dragons and the world government. He becomes a beacon of hope, embodying the ideals of freedom and rebellion that Luffy represented in the original timeline. Meanwhile, Luffy, groomed by the celestial dragons, stands on the opposite side of this ideological divide. This setup creates an epic and deeply personal conflict. As Joy Boy, Ace's mission directly threatens the stability of the celestial dragon's rule, making him Luffy's primary target. The two brothers, once inseparable, are now positioned as opposing forces in a battle that will determine the fate of the world. Ace, fighting for liberation, represents the unyielding spirit of freedom, while Luffy, wielding the power of a storm god, represents the oppressive might of the establishment. The emotional stakes are immense. This isn't just a clash of ideologies, it's a confrontation between two brothers whose lives were shaped by radically different circumstances. How would Luffy reconcile his loyalty to the celestial dragons with the undeniable truth of Ace's cause? Could their bond withstand the weight of their roles in this fractured world? This rivalry, steeped in tragedy and brotherhood, becomes the heart of this alternate One Piece universe. The Storm God awakens. In this alternate timeline, Luffy's powers take on an entirely different form. As a celestial dragon, he wouldn't eat the Nika fruit and gain the stretchy, rubbery abilities we know him for. Instead, he might acquire a mythical Zoan fruit, specifically the Hito Hito no Mi model Susanoo no Mikoto, inspired by the storm god from Japanese mythology. This fruit would be a perfect match for Luffy in this reality, granting him control over storms, lightning, and the seas. It's a power that aligns with his father Dragon's rumored storm-based abilities, tying Luffy's newfound strength to his lineage. Imagine a young Luffy in merry joys, struggling to control his immense power. The fruit's abilities would make him a walking tempest, capable of summoning lightning and unleashing storms with a mere flick of his hand. Under the guidance of Saint Figureland Garling and the Holy Knights, Luffy would learn to harness these chaotic powers, transforming into a warrior of unparalleled might. He wouldn't just be strong, he'd be a force of nature, shaking the heavens and the seas with his presence. This storm god Luffy would be terrifyingly powerful, capable of creating hurricanes and devastating enemies with bolts of lightning. His combat style would blend the raw destructive force of his devil fruit with the precision of a master swordsman, making him an unstoppable force on the battlefield. Yet, beneath all this power lies the same adventurous, rebellious spirit that defined the original Luffy. Could even a godlike transformation suppress his desire for freedom and justice? Or would his stormy powers become a metaphor for the internal conflict raging within him, a struggle between his loyalty to the celestial dragons and his unshakable belief in the value of freedom? A battle of gods, sun versus storm. The climax of this alternate reality centers on a breathtaking showdown between Luffy and Ace, brothers turned rivals in a world fractured by their opposing destinies. Ace, wielding the powers of the Nika fruit, has embraced his role as Joy Boy, the sun god. He's rallied a coalition of liberated kingdoms, pirates, and revolutionaries to challenge the world government and the celestial dragon's reign. On the other side stands Luffy, the storm god, leading the Holy Knights and the Marines to crush the rebellion. Their confrontation unfolds in a setting rich with symbolism, Alabasta. Once a land of freedom and resistance, it now becomes the stage for a cataclysmic battle. The Sun God and the Storm God clash with powers that could shake the very foundations of the world. Ace's fiery determination and rubbery unpredictability meet Luffy's lightning-fast strikes and tempestuous fury. Every attack sends shockwaves across the battlefield as their conqueror's haki splits the sky and sends weaker combatants to their knees. Yet, this isn't just a battle of strength. It's a fight between ideologies. Ace fights for liberation, driven by the belief that every person deserves the right to freedom. Luffy, on the other hand, fights to maintain the order he's been taught to protect, but with each blow, he begins to question the world he's defending. The clash between the sun and storm isn't just a spectacle, it's a turning point for both brothers as they're forced to confront the deepest truths about their roles in this fractured world. The turning point, Luffy's choice. In the heat of their battle, something shifts in Luffy. As Ace fights with unwavering determination, Luffy begins to see the world through his brother's eyes. The battlefield isn't just chaos and destruction, it's a testament to the hope and resilience Ace has inspired. He sees the people Ace has liberated, their joy and gratitude shining even amid war. In stark contrast, Luffy notices the misery of the Marines and Holy Knights who fight alongside him, burdened by the weight of the oppressive system they're upholding. This moment of clarity strikes Luffy like a bolt of lightning. For the first time, he understands the true cost of the Celestial Dragon's rule. The ideals he's been trained to protect crumble before the undeniable truth of Ace's cause. The Storm God, who once wielded his power with absolute conviction, hesitates. His swords, symbols of his loyalty to the Holy Land, feel heavy in his hands. In a defining moment, Luffy makes a choice that shatters the expectations of everyone around him. He lowers his blades and extends a hand to Ace, acknowledging the truth he can no longer deny. This act of defiance isn't just a rejection of the Celestial Dragons, it's a declaration of his freedom. By choosing to fight alongside his brother, Luffy embraces the core of who he is, someone who values freedom above all else. This decision marks a turning point, not just for Luffy, but for the entire world. It's the moment when the storm clouds part and the sun begins to shine, signaling the dawn of a new era. Together, the Sun God and the Storm God prepare to face the world's greatest threats, united by a shared vision of liberation and hope. A new dawn for the world. With Luffy and Ace united, the tides of the war shift dramatically. Their combined strength inspires allies across the world to rise against the oppressive rule of the Celestial Dragons. Pirates, revolutionaries, and even disillusioned Marines rally to their cause, creating a force so powerful it shakes the foundations of Marriage Wise itself. Their alliance sends ripples through every corner of the One Piece world. Former enemies find common ground, joining forces to challenge the system that has kept them divided for centuries. Even figures like Shanks and Dragon are drawn into the conflict, adding their strength to the fight for a new era. The battle is far from easy though. The Celestial Dragons, backed by the Gorosei, the Admirals, and the enigmatic Emu, unleash their full might in a desperate bid to maintain their grip on power. At the heart of this final struggle is Luffy, the Storm God who has turned against his upbringing. His journey, though vastly different from the one we know, leads him to the same truth: freedom is worth fighting for. Alongside Ace, the Sun God, he becomes a symbol of hope and rebellion, embodying the spirit of liberation that Joy Boy represented. As the dust settles and the storm clears, the world is forever changed. The Celestial Dragon's reign is shattered, and a new dawn rises over the Grand Line. Luffy and Ace, once separated by their fates, stand together as brothers, united by their shared dream of a free world. This alternate reality, though wildly different from the original story, reaffirms the same core message, that no matter the odds, the fight for freedom is one worth taking. How do you think Luffy's bond with Ace would develop in this alternate reality? Let us know in the comments below.